It's the Ed Bernstein Show, Home Edition. Now, here's your host, Ed Bernstein.
Hi, welcome to our show. I'm Ed Bernstein. And once again, we're going to talk to some judicial candidates a little bit later in the show. Dan Gilliam, who's running for district court judge, will be on the show. But right now, we do have a very important Supreme Court race. And with me now is Ozzie Fumo, who is a candidate for Supreme Court. I don't want to confuse it with the district court candidates that we've been interviewing. And Ozzie, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate being on with you.
Good. And you know, I know Ozzie not only because he's an attorney around town and he works with you work with a guy who I worked with 45 years ago. He's getting old, Tom Pitaro. But you have been in the legislature, right? You want to talk about why you went into became a legislator in the state, you know, and why you're deciding now to run for the Supreme Court?
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me on here. I understand you celebrated your 1,000th show this year. Is that right?
That's right.
I've been on twice now, so I feel honored to be here. Thank you very much for that. I was thinking about it's like Saturday Night Live. If you get more than one or two opportunities to be on the show, maybe you get a coffee cup or a host. But I'm going to start counting now. But thank you very much for having me. And I've lived in Las Vegas for 45 years. I grew up here. My dad worked for Hilton Hotels, was transferred, and I spent my formative years, in Las Vegas, and knew I always wanted to stay. At the time, guys like you and I went to law school. There was no law school in Nevada. So we had to leave and go back. I went to the University of San Diego for undergrad. My wife and I both went there. We met in high school. But I always knew I wanted to come back to Las Vegas, and I wanted to serve, and I wanted to do some good with it. So spent a lot of years as a practicing attorney, and I've done everything from family law, civil law, dabbled in personal injury, but spent the most time in my career doing criminal defense work, representing the people. And in 2016, decided I wanted to do a little bit more to give back. I'd been a judicial referee in Justice Court in 2015. I had been a hearing master for the Police Fatality Fact-Finding Review Board. And it was through those experiences that I wanted to get involved with the legislature and help make the law that I was, constitutionally defending at this point. And so in 2015 and 16, I ran for the legislature and won. Was very fortunate to work with a Republican governor at that time and got some bills passed, and have worked with a Democratic governor now and gotten bills passed in the legislature, spent 2 sessions there. And it was during those sessions that I realized, my heart was in, I loved writing the law. I loved my time at the legislature, but I really wanted to get in helping families like I do in the courts. And I felt the best way to do that would be as a Supreme Court justice and actually, deciding the constitutionality of legal issues to help hardworking Nevadans.
When you look at the differences of those jobs, of those positions that you've had, being in the legislature, we have, 50-some...
63.
63 legislators, okay. Between the Assembly and the Senate. On the Supreme Court, you have, less people to develop a consent with, right? But I would think that the types of situations that you deal with are entirely different. One in creating the law and the other one interpreting the law.
You're exactly right. There's 63 different people up there. And when I first got up there, I thought, how awesome is that? There's 3 million people in Nevada, and there's 63 people who actually, get to get in that room and draft this and discuss this and decide it. And express what the legislative intent is going to be for the other 3 million people. And each one of us represents a certain constituency. With the Assembly, you represent 65,000 people. And as a senator, double that, 130,000 people each. And each of them have their own issues and problems that they want addressed. And being in that room and deciding that is an awesome responsibility. But you're absolutely right. At the Supreme Court, you go from 63 people in the legislature to a different branch of government where it's just 7 at the Supreme Court that are interpreting the constitutionality of those laws. And that, too, is an awesome responsibility. And it was my time in the legislature when I watched and worked with the Supreme Court on different issues and discussed legislative intent and what was going on in the room when we were making those decisions and how those decisions and questions that were asked during the legislature would affect the Supreme Court's interpretation of the law, and seeing that the cases that they were deciding, I really wanted to be a part of that. And I thought it was the next logical step to go from, I'm Italian, I speak with my hands a lot. Go from interpreting it or deciding, what the legislative intent would be to going into that other room and helping them with the constitutionality of it was, I thought, a natural progression.
As a private attorney, you have been in front of a lot of judges for a lot of years, and as well as Supreme Court justices. What are some of the important characteristics that a Supreme Court justice should have? I
think to listen fairly and keep an open mind as to both sides. I think you have to respect both sides, because both sides, when they're coming at you with the issue, are passionate about their side. And listening soberly, acting judiciously, and treating both sides with that ultimate respect. But then it comes back to you as the Supreme Court justice to go in with your team or in your room and decide what is the constitutionality of this law and which way it's going to be. Every case is different, which I really love about the law. One of the things I love about practicing law is no matter what kind of case I get, I'm learning something new, whether it's about, workers' comp, whether it's about family law and different things. There's always something new to learn. And I think as a Supreme Court justice, that's important, to keep that open mind and know that you're not the be-all, end-all, but there's always something to learn. And don't go into the room having made up your mind. I think you can actually learn. And I've had judges tell me from the bench, Mr. Fumo, and I came on the bench, I was going to decide one way, but after hearing the arguments, I think you're right. I think I'm going to go this way. And I think that's one of the biggest things you can have is that heart of fairness, open-mindedness, and just be willing to accept responsibility and make those decisions, not prior to coming on the bench, but after listening to both sides.
You also teach over at the Boyd Law School?
I love that. You were talking about the great Tom Pitaro, and I've been with him since 2012. We got together, and we wanted to get together a little bit earlier, but I had a building that I had. They had a fire at the building, and we were trying to get the loans redone for everything. And he and I got together in 2012, and he was the one who introduced me to teaching at the law school. And when I was at the legislature, I met with Dean Hamilton and talked about my desire to want to go back and teach there. And I've been teaching there for the last several years and really enjoy it. The students there are brighter every year. Again, I learn just as much from the students as I get to teach them. I teach trial advocacy because they love doing trials. I teach opening statements and closing arguments, and I teach pretrial litigation. I think I'm the only adjunct professor, Dean Hamilton was telling me, that teaches 3 different subjects, more than one subject at the law school. But I enjoy it every semester. It's the kids there are great. UNLV, Boyd Law School, is #1 in writing and has been for the last several years. And I want to say they're in the top 50 nationally ranked for law schools. And it's the best value, the best bang for the buck you can get in any law school in the country. I just can't say enough good things about being there, but that's one of my great joys. And I think that's an experience as a professor that I can bring to the Supreme Court as well. It's an academic exercise being on the Supreme Court and having that history and that background. And I think one of the other things is being a private practitioner is one of the things that will help me as well. Being a private practitioner and telling the students what it's like, but being on the Supreme Court, I don't think we've had too many private practitioners on the Supreme Court. They usually work for government. They usually work for our corporations and rarely come through the ranks of having actually defended a person or taught and had that individual experience with someone. But yeah, the law school is one of the passions. I told Dean Hamilton, if I had to pick between one of the 3 things, Boyd Law School would be right up there.
Yeah, amen. You were mentioning the experience of Supreme Court justices. I was thinking Mike Cherry is another example of somebody who has that type of experience that you have as well. He's been on all sides of everything. Yeah, it's good.
And I think it was a fantastic Supreme Court. Yeah, did a great job.
Yeah, as a legislature, I mean, you said you represented your constituents in the assembly, 65,000 people. Running for the Supreme Court, as you said, it's 3 million people in Nevada. It's the entire state. So it means campaigning not just in your own neighborhood, but going around the state and campaigning and dealing with a lot of different views, right? So is that difficult to manage?
It really has been. And I thought I knew what I was getting into as far as a statewide campaign, having that limited experience in that bubble with the assembly. When I was running for the assembly, I think I knocked on every single door in my district. I went to every house and got a lot of good input from different sides, different people. And both sessions when I was at the assembly, I was able to pass bills based on conversations I had with constituents. The first one I had in 2017 was a bill we called Harvey's Law. And it was a constituent of mine. They lived in my district, had a son who was 51 years old, was special needs, and was riding a paratransit bus and choked on a sandwich. And the coroner said he was able to pull the sandwich out of his mouth with tweezers or fingers. The airway was really not that obstructed. And I was able to go up there. I found out that we were the only state in the nation that did not teach paratransit drivers CPR. And it was based on my conversations with that family when I was able to get the law passed. And now we are joined with everybody else. Paratransit drivers do learn CPR. So it was that experience, that I was able to take to the legislature from actually knocking on doors. And it's different now, especially with COVID. You can't get out there and knock on doors, and we're not going to all these events and big parties hosted where you can introduce yourself to hundreds of people. So that's why I think opportunities like being on your show, where you can get your voice out and seen by hundreds of people at one sitting where you otherwise couldn't, is so important, because nobody saw this coming. We had one path to victory as a campaign going forward when we first started, and then February and March hit, and everything grinded to a halt. And it's just been a completely different animal to campaign. Nobody knows what to expect or what to do, really. We're all learning as we go.
I love that story about the CPR you were talking about. I mean, it just defines government at its very best. It explains why it's important to go out and shake hands and meet constituents and get their viewpoints. And it's an incredible thing when a constituent actually tells a story and a candidate listens, gets elected, and follows through. Man, that's great stuff. It really is. Thank
you very much. And that family was with me the entire time. It was the Chernikoffs was their last name. And we actually sat down with them, because they really said that, no amount of money is going to bring my son back, but maybe I can prevent that grief from happening to another family if we can do this one thing. And I think they were the ones who told me, we're the only state in the country that didn't do it. And when I found that out and looked at the other states and the other laws, it was fascinating to me to go through that process with everybody. And I learned something. I thought when I got up there it was a feel-good bill. I mean, who doesn't want to teach paratransit drivers CPR? It's a 3-year program. It's and then you start dealing with other sides. And the Teamsters who are supporting me in my election came in and shut the door and said, wait a minute, who's going to pay for this education? Because our guys are making $12 an hour. A lot of them can't afford this. And so we had to sit down with the RTC and negotiate those things. And it was really an experience in bringing both sides of the table together, sitting down almost like a settlement conference. You do those with your personal injury cases. We do them with criminal cases now too, where you actually bring in the sides with a judge to try to resolve it. And it was fascinating to have both sides sit down and agree, sometimes agree to disagree, and work it out to where one guy was going to pay it, they were going to take it. And it's been working really, really well since 2017. And now we're in line with everybody else, and hopefully have prevented another tragedy.
Hey, Ozzie, we have about 30 seconds left. Can you just make the case for why somebody should vote for you?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am the only candidate in this race with that kind of experience: family law, criminal law, personal injury. I have every endorsement. The unions have endorsed me. First responders have endorsed me. The court marshals, those that are in the courts every day, have watched me and my opponent. They've endorsed me. The court personnel have endorsed me. And the only way to get the word out is being on shows like yours and other Zoom meetings. And I think if you look at my history, look at my opponent's history, and what we've done with our careers, the clear choice is Fumo. And you can learn more about me at ozziefumo.com.
Thank you so much, Ozzie Fumo, candidate for the Nevada Supreme Court. Get out there and vote, people.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My daughter Dana fought a long battle with Crohn's disease before passing last year.
It's our goal to help the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation find a cure for this horrible disease.
Join Max and I in scoring our goal to find a cure. Hey, with me now is judicial candidate Dan Gilliam. And Dan, unlike a lot of the candidates we talk to, a lot of them are existing judges. This is kind of new for you. You're coming out of the private sector and working, as a private attorney, going into a judgeship. Why?
Hey, good afternoon, Ed. Good to see you again. It's always kind of been a goal of mine, although one that wasn't at the forefront of my mind for a long time. I've been an attorney in town for about 15 years now, and I've devoted my entire practice to criminal law. I have an equal split of prosecution experience and defense experience. And, like I said, it was always kind of noodling around there for a long time about that's what I wanted to do ultimately. And then when 2020 rolled around, there were some, whispers and hints about a lot of judges retiring or leaving the bench. And so I thought that would be a good opportunity for me to try and get in there and get my feet wet and try this campaign thing out for a try. So that's where I am now.
Did you ever picture yourself when you're in law school of, one day running for a district court judgeship?
No, I don't think that I did. I don't really remember. It was a long time ago, but I don't remember actually having that as one of my goals when I was in law school. I kind of developed that goal after I had started practicing for a while. So in law school, I don't think it was on my radar. I know for a lot of people it is, but it wasn't on mine at the time.
You went to law school in Ohio State?
I did, yeah. I went to law school at The Ohio State University. I also got my undergrad and graduate degrees from there as well. So I'm a Buckeye through and through.
You still follow them?
I do. I'm very, very disappointed about the football season this year, but I understand. So.
But then you made a decision, kind of fortuitous decision, I guess. I mean, I always, question. I mean, like I did it myself a long time ago, moving from back east to Las Vegas. You moved from Ohio to Vegas. It's not an easy decision or an easy thing to change your entire life, leave your family and the comfort of where you grew up to move to a new place a couple thousand miles away. What precipitated that decision?
Yeah, so I had been in Ohio for about 30 years at that time. And as much as I love the state of Ohio, it was time for a change. And what really kind of, pushed me in the direction was my decision not to take the Ohio bar. And so when I finished law school at Ohio State, I purposefully kept myself out of taking the bar exam for the state of Ohio because I knew that if I did and when I passed, I would end up getting a job and I'd end up staying there. And as you well know, Ed, you can't really transfer state to state. It's not as easy as it might sound when you're an attorney. A lot of times you have to take a bar exam in a new state in order to practice there. And so when I decided not to take the Ohio bar exam, okay, that's when I decided, all right, what bar exam am I going to take? And so I knew I wanted to move out west. I'd always wanted to do that. And so it was between Nevada, California, and Arizona, specifically Las Vegas, San Diego, and Phoenix. And so I went out, I checked out all the cities, and Las Vegas won by a long shot. So here I am.
Did you have any other kind of jobs before, going through college and law school?
I did. So, just like every other college kid, I had a part-time job going through undergraduate and graduate school. But I got my undergrad and my graduate degrees in education, so I thought I wanted to be a teacher. About halfway through graduate school, I kind of realized that it wasn't for me, but I still wanted to work with kids at that time. And so I didn't go to law school immediately after graduate school. I took about a 4-year break. And within those 4 years, I worked at a residential treatment facility for foster kids. There were children ages ranged between 6 and 13 years of age. They had some very difficult, times at home. Either they couldn't be, taken care of by their families, or foster homes weren't an option. And so they came to what we called a crisis facility for us to determine whether we could rehabilitate them to have them go back home, become a foster family child, or go to a long-term residential treatment facility. So I worked with the kids directly for my first 2 years there, and then my second 2 years I became program director. But after doing that for a couple of years, I kind of realized that I needed to get back and further my education so I could become an attorney.
Well, good for you. I mean, that's one of the more difficult things, working in that foster parent program. Really, very difficult. Yeah.
Certainly. Rewarding too, though.
What makes a good judge, Dan?
Boy, there's a lot of things. I think the two things that come to mind immediately is respect for all the parties that are involved and the ability to listen. Of course, knowledge of the law and experience are very, very important as well. But what people are going to remember when they come into the courtroom is how well they were respected by the court and its staff, and how well the judge listened to the arguments. And Ed, I don't have to tell you this. You've been practicing for a very long time now. You know how it is. Sometimes when you go into court and you get an adverse ruling, you feel that the judge had his or her mind made up already. And I become very frustrated in that situation. So, I've dedicated, one of my things that I'm going to do is I'm going to not make any decisions before I hear all of the oral arguments from parties and then make an informed decision thereafter. I want everyone to feel that comes in, whether it's a highfalutin attorney or whether it's someone with no attorney. I want them to be able to come in and feel like they've been heard. We're in an adversarial process, and so not everyone is going to be happy with the ruling of a judge. And so certainly some people are going to walk away disappointed, but what I don't want them walking away is feeling like they weren't heard or that they weren't treated fairly. And so that's one of the things that I'll do. In addition to the experience that I have and my ability to come to the right conclusion, I'm going to treat all the parties fairly, and I'm going to listen to what people have to say.
How's it like practicing law now with the COVID-19?
Well, it's a little bit different, and there are some things that I wonder if they're going to kind of permanently change. And so at the RJC, which is the Regional Justice Center, doing criminal law, I'm down there basically every day. And so when it first started, when COVID first kind of hit and we all realized what we were up against, a lot of the courts were just continuing the cases out. Now we're at a point where we can't really continue them anymore because there's quite the backlog. And so the courts have moved to a lot of remote appearances. And just by way of example, after your show today, Ed, I have a couple of remote appearances that I have to make in district court. And so I'm very curious what's going to happen once COVID is gone and once we all get back to normal and we can go to sporting events and go to restaurants and not have to worry about wearing our masks wherever we go. I wonder if the courts are going to say, hey, look, these virtual appearances kind of have some merit independent of the fact that coronavirus is over. And so I'm very curious how that's going to affect us in the future. But with COVID and practicing law now, it's certainly a different aspect. You can only put 4 people on the elevator. The courts don't want you to be there if you don't have to be. I actually have a couple of clients that have told me that they're not feeling well. And I immediately call the DA or the prosecutor and I say, hey, look, my client's not feeling well, and let's pass it 2 weeks. We don't want him in the courthouse. And so that's kind of the things that we're working with and struggling with, and not to mention the bigger issues out there, which are, there are individuals that are in custody that have a speedy trial right, where that right is now foregone because of the pandemic. And so we're kind of having a backlog of all these jury trials that are set to go. And so I'm not sure when this is going to come to an end, but once it does, the courts are going to be very, very busy processing through everything that's been continued.
And if you become a judge, then you're going to be one of the people having to come up with some solutions on how to process all these cases, all the backlog. And, this virtual thing, I do think there is a place for it. I mean, I think oftentimes, as you know, we go to court and you're checking on a status check, for instance, and the whole, you can be waiting there for, for an hour and a half to have your case heard, and just to go up in front of a judge and say, oh yeah, this is going to be continued for 60 days. Right. I mean, so we can do away with a lot of that wasting time in court on issues like that, preliminary issues. So this may end up being, some positive actions, coming out of the COVID-19. I understand that you enjoy riding motorcycles.
I do. I've been riding for a little over 20 years, and I guess closer to 25 years. I've always had a motorcycle from the time that I started riding up until now. I actually have a couple of them. Fortunately, my wife and I don't have any kids. And so we can spend a lot of our time doing the things that we want to do. And one of those things is riding motorcycles. So my wife is partner and CEO of a law firm here in town. And so very, very lucky for me, she likes to ride motorcycles as well. So, we have, she has a couple of Harleys, I've got a Harley and a couple of Ducatis. And so whenever we can, when it's not 115 degrees outside, we'll be on our motorcycles whenever we can with our free time.
I was trying to count those as you were talking. So you went close to 4, 5, 6 motorcycles between you?
Yeah, I think we have 5 now. Yeah, she has the 2 Harleys. I've got a Harley Fat Boy Low. I've got a Ducati Panigale race bike and a Ducati Monster.
Yeah. Hey, if you look closely, you see this mark right there?
I do.
Yep. Fell off a motorcycle in college, man. Be careful out there.
Oh, is that how you got that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And those were the days.
It a lot worse. What happened?
I just hit some gravel, and I was probably not as proficient in motorcycling as you are, but so I fell. But in those days you didn't have to wear a helmet, so today it would probably be hopefully a different situation.
Sure.
It's very difficult. This is your first election you're running for, and so you really don't have anything to compare it to, but in previous elections, when you're running for a judge or a state office or a county office, you go out and you press the flesh. You knock on doors, you shake hands, you do that type of thing. I don't know if you're able to do that now, and if not, how do you really communicate with people?
Yeah, I'm most certainly not able to do that now, and that's unfortunate because I, like most everyone else, believes that the face-to-face communications are the most important ones. But, like everyone else, I'm making do the best that I can. I make as many phone calls as I can to constituents and to voters throughout Clark County to just give them the opportunity to listen if they want to, so they can become educated about the upcoming election. There are typically all kinds of campaign events that you would normally go to in person. Well, those have shifted over to Zoom events now. And so I have 1 or 2 Zoom events daily that are campaign oriented. So I'm still doing the work. I'm still trying to get my name out there as much as I can and answer anyone's questions should they have them. But you're right. It's one of the many challenges that this pandemic has created for just an election, not to mention all the other challenges that it's created for people. But in my small world, yes, it's something new and something that's a hurdle for sure with regards to the election, but it's not something that we can't overcome and that I'm working hard to do so.
What would have been some of the surprises and the positive things that you've experienced, running for a district court judge?
So a couple of surprising things. To answer the first half of your question, one of the biggest surprises was the time commitment. I didn't realize that this campaigning and running for what is going to ultimately be about a year. I started back in October of last year. So about a year of campaigning, I didn't realize it was going to be as time consuming as it is. And so that's one thing that surprised me, was how much of my free time is now devoted to the campaign. The second half of your question, kind of what I enjoy about it the most, I really enjoy meeting the people that I'm going to be representing. And so one of the reasons that I want to become a judge is because I want to keep my community safe. And I find that, the 15 years of experience that I have, both as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, are going to enable me to do that. And so, Ed, when you first start out and you leave school or leave your trade school or leave the military or leave high school, whatever it is, first thing you want to do is kind of establish your residence. And once you do that, you make a relationship. You perhaps have a family that gets going. Over time, you develop this need, at least I did anyways. I developed a need to keep my home safe and to keep my wife safe. Once I meet my neighbors and establish relationships with them, I want to keep my neighbors safe. And now I'm to the point in my career where I want to try and keep all of Clark County safe. And so the reason that I want to do that is because, first and primarily, I live here and I want my county to be safe. But now that I know as many people as I know, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to use my experience to do so. And that's one of the chief reasons that I'm running for judge in Department 24 is because I feel like I'm at a point in my career now where I can kind of keep the community safe.
Thank you. Dan Gilliam is running for district court judge. And I encourage our viewers, when you're voting, whether you're voting absentee, mail-in, in person, however you're voting, I encourage everybody to go all the way down the ballot, because we have a few dozen judgeships that are running, candidates that are running. And they're just as important and sometimes more important in the way they affect your life than voting for president. So, make sure you get down the ballot. There's people like Dan Gilliam, who's, is a voice that wants to be heard, and he deserves your attention. So thank you so much, Dan. Good luck in the election, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
When sorry is not enough. Enough said. Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.